And now we call readMSR ether. And now what we do is that we actually try to access all those pages again, read the byte from this page. And if we actually at least once get a byte 22, that means that the processor actually didn't find the mapping for this VA to PA mapping and actually used the page tables, so actually used the remapping that we set in PTE. So this means that actually one of the entry was replaced, at least one of the entry. If there was nothing, if this didn't use any TLB entry, then all the pages, even though we changed PTE, our processor will use TLB to access all the pages. This is a very nice attack actually, because it doesn't use any timing, it just uses the functionality. So it's actually nice. The problem is it doesn't work actually. This is what I said. The problem is that because we don't have one TLB for 4K pages, we actually have two levels TLB. One is 32. The other, as you saw on the slide before, is actually 512. Well, not a problem, you might say. So let's set n to be 32 plus 512 to make sure that we actually will put mappings into all those entries, right? This doesn't work either, because TLB level 2 is also not fully associative. It's only 4-way associative. Again, we learn it by executing CPU ID instruction. That means that in order to fill the whole TLB level 2 for 4K pages, we would have to fill all. For each set, we need to fill all 4 ways. To do this, this time it's not physical address, this time it's a virtual address. So in order to do that, we need to specifically allocate those 32 plus 512 pages in such a way that we control index, that we have all indexes from 0 to 127, each time 4 times to fill all those entries. If we don't do this way, we always miss at least one entry, and we cannot have a guarantee that a hypervisor will not use actually this entry. This is actually more complex than L1 data cache collision avoidance, as I implemented in TLB profiler, because here we need to use specific virtual addresses. Unfortunately, there is no API function to ask Vista to allocate page in kernel mode, not in user mode, at specific virtual address. So the way to do this would be allocate much more pages and choose the one which we want to use, which is actually probably would be quite time consuming. And again, we have a very complex detector. Again, the idea very simple. Everybody thinks it's simple. Turns out to be quite complex. But still, it can be done probably. How we could approach defeating this? We believe this could be defeated using shadow page tables, or nested page tables. I'm going to talk about this in a moment. Basically, shadow page tables would allow us to find out that the guest modifies its PTE. So if you find out that guest modifies 544 PTEs, that will be suspicious, and we use blue chicken strategy to uninstall for a moment. We didn't implement it, of course, in our current Bluepill prototype. VMM detection, just to summarize this all was about virtualization mode detection, detecting a VMM, not detecting malware. Let's move on to detecting virtualization-based malware explicitly. So what's so special actually about Bluepill? It's not really about virtualization, even though it's really a pretty sexy term these days. It's all about something different. Did I tell you we finish at 7 p.m.? Nah, I'm just kidding. So obviously we have like type 1, type 2 hooking, which is like hooking code, hooking data. The point is all the rootkits I'm aware of, besides virtual, they hook something, and Bluepill, they hook something, they introduce some modifications into system, hook some function pointers, hook some code. So we can always actually find them if we had at least theoretically, if we imagine having an ideal system integrity monitor, let's say written by Microsoft, who has full access to source code, we can theoretically imagine writing a integrity detector that would check all the system, that the code is not modified. That's actually pretty easy. And then all the function pointers are not modified. For example, all the end-use pointers, etc. Still, it wouldn't detect blue pill just because blue pill doesn't hook anything. It just sits beside the operating system, just looks at it and controls it, but doesn't modify any bytes. So we cannot detect it really by integrity monitoring. However, if we look at the approach that the antivirus people actually take these days, it's not ensuring the goodness, it's actually enumerating badness, which means that they actually look for, they would like to scan memory and look for something that looks suspicious. It's actually pretty challenging because even if you can scan a memory, obviously you can find blue pill code if we didn't use memory hiding. So let's say you find this blue pill code. It's actually pretty easy using a heuristic approach to find out that this code actually looks like a hypervisor. However, now we believe it's very challenging to find out that this hypervisor actually looks like a malicious hypervisor. So again, it's a problem distinguishing between a hypervisor versus a malicious hypervisor. But anyway, let's talk about memory hiding. Okay, this is, Alex will probably spend the next 30 seconds on detailing this thing.
It's a good idea to blue pill to have a private page tables to use, because if it will share the same page tables with the guest, then guest will be able to modify those pages of the blue pill code and so on. So blue pill has to build completely different page tables, fill them with physical addresses of the blue pill's code and data, and then execute. It probably also can remove the mappings of these pages from the guest page tables, so to that any memory scanner code which will be run in guest will not notice any blue pill code in its memory. Actually, this approach can be defeated by scanning the page table, by scanning the physical memory using a private PTE. A detector may allocate a PTE and then perform a loop through all the physical memory available on the system, so that it will just read the separate 4 kilobyte pager, for example, and it will write a dump of memory to disk or something. But the interesting problem here is that blue pill code is not 4 kilobytes in range. It's much more, probably 16 pages. So it is possible for blue pill to place its code in separated pages in memory, which do not which have many which will have lots of memory between them, so to that make permutations of the memory. It may just shuffle its code pages in memory, and the detector then should walk the virtual page tables of the host to get the correct correct pages of the blue pill, so that it may apply some memory signatures, for example, to find its code.
Yeah, so that's why we actually can go even more paranoid and actually implement something which is called shadow paging. Shadow paging is what usually virtual machines like VMware, virtual PCs then are using to implement virtualization of physical memory for the guest. Shadow paging, probably most of you know what is it. It's just basically about intercepting CR3 register inside the guest, pointing it to our copy of guest pages, which are GPT guest page tables, to our shadow page tables, and now marking guest pages in such a way that, like not present, that any access to them by guest will cause was an exception that we will catch, and if we catch exception, we actually see what guest was trying to do with its own page tables, and we update our shadow page tables, which actually has the real mapping for the guest virtual to physical memory. There is nothing tricky. No, it's tricky, but it works well, implemented by all the virtual machines, so it's possible to be implemented. The Barcelona, AMD Barcelona, which is coming like next month or something, will bring nested paging, which is a hardware version of shadow page tabling, which makes it much easier for people to actually implement shadow page tabling or nested page tabling. So obviously, we didn't implement shadow page tabling, just shadow paging, just because we don't see detectors doing even that. And we still have like permutation. But still, if we get processor implementing nested paging, that probably would be not that difficult to implement nested paging. For example, that would allow us to defeat Adams' Peel, the Kate Adams algorithm, as I said before. The lack of IMMU, the lack of a hardware method to prevent DMA devices to do DMA attacks, like reading, still makes it possible for the detector to use one of the I/O devices to read the memory of the hypervisor. But, well, come on, this is pretty crazy. I mean, detector exploiting some device to actually do the DMA read of the memory, to scan the memory, and then, well, decide what is a malicious and non-malicious hypervisor. This is pretty... But still, IMMU is also coming, 2008 or something. Okay, nested hypervisor. This is probably the most important part here. Well, first, if BluePill didn't actually support nested virtualization, then it would be easy for the detector just to try to create a test virtual machine. And if it failed, it would be suspicious. So we need to support nested virtualization. And we do it this way. I showed this slide last year, and I said that we didn't implement it. And in the meantime, we implemented for the new BluePill. So here's the idea. There's a BluePill. BluePill executes VMrun. Here's the guest operating system that we BluePilled. And now let's say the guest tries to execute a virtual machine that uses VMrun that we intercept. We intercept the VMrun. We realize that guest was trying to create a virtual machine. We look at what VMCB it used, and we execute VMrun on behalf of the guest, however, using VMCB2 prim, which is the union of VMCB2 and VMCB1, if we consider interception, the set of interceptions. And then we execute VM2, which is the nested, which VM1 becomes a nested hypervisor right now. Let's say there is an intercept in VM2. This brings us back to the hypervisor, which realizes that the intercept was from the VM1 guest. So it assumes the guest, emulating that it actually received the intercept. There is a catch here, however, because normally this VM1 hypervisor, emulated hypervisor, expects that the intercept is delivered using VM exit processor exception. However, we deliver it using VMrun. We assume the guest and not use VM exit. The problem here is that VM exit is supposed to clear GIF global interrupt flag. So the hypervisor expects that at this point GIF is 0. There is no interrupt, and the interrupts are buffered until hypervisor executes the STGI instruction, which sets GIF to 1. However, we assume the guest using VMrun, which does the opposite. It actually sets GIF to 1, which means interrupts are allowed here. However, this does not prevent us to actually run BluePill inside another BluePill. So we spent lots of time, like a lot of time, implementing this support for nested BluePills. And yes, we can run nested BluePills inside another.